Thank you very much, Federica, and good morning, bonjour, everyone. This is indeed the second topic of the day, and I am sure it is a topic that is very close to most of our hearts, our prayers, and our thoughts, particularly for the last few years. It is as well a big priority for UNICEF and a big priority of this alliance with the World Council of Churches. It's a topic we work a lot, of course, through our programs in the field in different countries. UNICEF was born actually linked to the refugee crisis created by the Second World War, so it's really linked to our whole history. We work with refugees, with migrants, with children left behind, with children that are displaced within the country, so we call all this uprooted, which is a generic term to refer to every child that has somehow been déraciné, I think is how they say it in French, not taken out of his or her roots. And we work more and more around this also through our communication, our public messages, our dialogue with decision makers, because it is such a critical issue, as we know, that is in many tables and offices around the world now. If you can put the slide, please. I just wanted to show in one only slide, no presentation, but just one slide that summarizes the agenda for action that for us encapsulates the work that we do for Children Uprooted. And as we have had the chance to see in these years of partnership with the World Council of Churches, it's an agenda we share and we really are committed, and I know many of you are working around some of those issues. We are talking about making sure that all children on the move, Children Uprooted, are protected from exploitation, violence, from any harm all along the journey. In particular, we have a strong message around the detention. You know that many children and families, just because they are seeking asylum or because they are fleeing war or persecution or violence or poverty, in many cases they end up in detention. And not only us, but the Committee on the Rights of the Child and many others have said that detention is not in the best interest of the child, and it shouldn't be a measure for dealing with migration. We advocate and ask governments to ensure that children uprooted are kept in education, continue to have access to a school, access to services such as health, like the rights of every child that we celebrate today move with them, no matter where they are, no matter the legal papers that they have. The right to health and the right to education should be respected and guaranteed all along the journey. A point that I know is very important for all of us, really trying to keep families together at all times, and if there is separation for any reason, to really work to bring them together again. It is such, the family at the end becomes the root, no, of the child when he or she is away, and it is so important. And then the two other points go beyond working with the children uprooted to really involve a wider spectrum of work. Is really working around the causes that are generating this movement. In some cases, and it is the ideal, we move because of work opportunities, we move because of, we are looking for different experiences, but unfortunately many of those children move because of war, because of persecution, because of poverty, and it is not the original wish or that of their families, and we need to tackle those reasons. And finally, a point that has already been raised in this space and is very of big concern for many of us is the rise in xenophobia, discrimination, fear, misunderstanding, and feeling of the migrant is the other, is different from us, and we need to break that distance. And in order to do so, particularly working on this final point, but linked to the rest, I think that the experience we are going to see and we are going to listen to today is really a unique opportunity. As lead of UNICEF's campaign, I go to many roundtables, events. We discuss about big negotiations in the UN that are taking place, legislation, many legal terms, and sometimes we bring a quick video, no, or a quote of a child. But I think that the panel we have here today, it's all about that part. It's about the human experience of those who travel, but also the human experience of those who welcome. And I am really looking forward to it, because I'm sure it's going to be very inspiring to all of us. So without further ado, I would like to invite to the chairs here, Reverend Antoinette Steiner. She is the coordinator of the support program for unaccompanied minors in the Protestant Church in the Canton Vaud, very close. Sanoussy, who was an unaccompanied minor himself and was supported by Antoinette and the church. And Coline, who will speak from the side of the host family and the experience of a young woman herself. She's 17 now, and how she has lived the experience of welcoming. So I think we are going to start with you, Reverend Antoinette. You can use that micro, and you will pass the slides as you prefer, or if you want to have the papers, and maybe she can directly use the other one.
I just want to see how it works.
I'm sure it was. Maybe you have to point there.
Ah. Let's see.
Okay. Here we go.
So, good morning. My name is Antoinette Steiner, and I'm a minister of the Evangelical Reformed Church of the Canton de Vaud, Switzerland. And I'm mother of 4. For 10 years now, I have been a chaplain in the Federal Registration Center for Refugees in Valorbe, located near the French border. Since 2016, I am also working with Action Parrainage, an ecumenical project developed by churches and civilian associations to mentor or support migrants' integration. I am coordinator of the project's part related to unaccompanied minor refugees. For years now in our region, Catholic and Reformed churches have been active together to support refugees, offering them human, spiritual, and often administrative help. 2015 was a so-called refugee crisis, and we had to change partially our pattern of action. On one hand, chaplains and deacons were not able to respond to the increasing demand and needs of the new arriving refugees, and on the other hand, many Swiss people were asking what they can do to help. So we thought it would be better to help refugees. We could train volunteers and so multiply our efficiency. In a very short time, couple of weeks, the specifications of pastors, chaplains, priests were adapted to emergencies. Churches may be sometimes very flexible. Churches and local associations for migrants created together the project called Action Parrainage, which means something like mentoring or supporting actions. The aim was to help refugees and Swiss people to meet each other. On one hand, we wanted to give refugees the opportunity to discover their new country, their new culture, to have contact, and give them help for administrative formalities as search for a job or accommodation. And on the other hand, the idea was to allow Swiss people to be in contact with migrants. Among these refugees were many underage, many so-called unaccompanied minor refugees, teenagers between 13 and 18 who are traveling alone. It was a great challenge for everyone. In a couple of months, The state had to create special homes for these children, to find educators, create new classes, and it took a long time and beginnings were very difficult. Some children attempted to commit suicide because of what they went through, but also because of the conditions here. So it was very important to develop a part of our helping project for them. What means supporting unaccompanied minor refugees? We are searching families able to welcome teens about 3 or 4 times a month to share meals, spend time over the weekend together, get school support, and it means also to support young refugees in their transition to adulthood. This transition is very difficult for young people because they are suddenly no longer considered as children and they have to cope with often insufficient assistance. One of our challenges was the dialogue with officials. We had to get the permission from the state so that the children would be allowed 3 or 4 times a month to stay with a Swiss family. Children's care and monitoring is strictly controlled by state in Switzerland. Any host family will have to go through a normally a very long proceeding that can take months or more. It was also a challenge to let official institutions understand we would respect their specific role. We would not interfere with them, but collaborate. What helped is the fact that churches were already active and known for their supportive action for migrants. On the other hand, emergency sometimes forces people and even institutions to be creative. States quickly accepted that Action Parrainage would take the responsibility to select and train families. Our credibility was enhanced through a collaboration with a well-known non-governmental organization called International Social Service, which was planning to launch similar projects in other Swiss cantons. After 2 years, more than 160 young refugees settled in our region have attended the program. Nowadays, around 80% of unaccompanied minor refugees have a support family. The idea of the project was very simple. The realization not always easy. And I'm very grateful to all young refugees we have met in Valorbe, and especially to Sanoussy, who is going to speak now. Regarding his own experience, he helped us to understand how complicated it could be to start a relationship and to trust someone if you have been persecuted and rejected in your own country and during a long and dangerous travel. Also, even if you deeply need parental figure, relationship with adults may be complicated if you had to fend alone for years. And this, in addition to obvious intercultural misunderstanding and the fact that teenagers are teenagers. But besides all difficulties, we are grateful and proud for the results. Thanks to the program, many young people could get friends, could share happy moments and holidays like any child here, could receive school support. And many support families helped finding apprenticeship and to plan future. On the other side, many Swiss families have grown, discovered new cultures, understood that these children or teens who had to face so many dangers and suffering and despite all continue to hope are somehow heroes. Is our project really a church project? The structure of the project involves church ministers and deacons representatives from the Jewish community and probably soon from the Muslim community, and many non-believers volunteers. We recruit some support families through churches, but I must confess a majority of the mentors have nothing to do with churches. They simply are people interested in supporting refugees. That is why they contact us. We, as churches, collaborate with individuals and associations interested in solidarity and fraternity behind cultures. And this project will not fill our churches and celebrations. We believe, nevertheless, to be in the heart of the gospel. We believe to be in the heart of the gospel every time people are meeting, despite the different cultures or religions, and when they are forgetting sometimes who is refugee and who is native. We believe to be at the service of the gospel if Swiss families discover that a teenager born in Afghanistan or Eritrea is in fact very similar to their teenager, and if Swiss families begin to think, what if our children had to cross desert and sea to get protection? A parent told me once, we will go on in the projects because we think it would really be a relief if one of our children was far away and we knew a family would support him. We believe to be serving God's kingdom if native teenagers and migrant teenagers begin to imagine a common future. And this experience becomes each day more prophetic in our European world obsessed with the idea of closing and building borders. We are, as churches, in our prophetic role of denouncing injustice when Swiss families become aware of what are the real conditions for refugees in our country. Many Swiss support families realized that the educating conditions reserved to underage refugees are not the same as for our children. A migrant child is first a migrant and then a child. These last days, really last week, I received 3 angry calls from families. Their young refugee has become 18 and was informed that he had to stop school or apprenticeship and would be sent back to his country despite insecurity. So, a teenager who had to leave his country and has been struggling years through desert, through Libya, and years to get rid of his nightmares and to adapt to our country, to our language, to our culture, may, not always, but he may be sent back to his country. Maybe if you read this even in a newspaper, you won't mind. But what if it concerns one of your own children, even a collected or hosted child? We believe that overcoming indifference has to do with the heart of the gospel. Of course, churches are not inventing solidarity or humanity, but in the name of the gospel, they have to help gestures of solidarity to multiply. Churches can reflect how to challenge and positively contaminate society through concrete acts of faith. All this has finally to do with our Christian vocation to be salt and light, leaven in the dough of the world. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for such a powerful testimony. And now we are going to hear from Sanoussy. He's going to speak in French, so those of you needing the earphones, please use them. I think he'd rather speak standing, so yeah, he's going to use that micro, and over to you.
Je vais devoir me lever parce que j'aime pas. Voilà. Bonjour, je m'appelle Sanoussy. En fait, je viens dans un pays où il y avait la guerre depuis en 2012. Puis j'ai fui parce qu'à ce temps, on nous obligeait, j'avais 15 ans. Puis je vivais avec mon père, il a été arrêté par des terroristes. Et puis du coup, j'avais pas les moyens, je devrais soit fuir, soit intégrer les groupes terroristes à ce temps. Et de ce fait, j'ai fui vers des pays, vers l'Algérie d'abord, et puis l'Algérie, il n'y avait pas moyen de se nourrir ou de faire, comment on appelle ça, le droit de s'entretenir. Donc il fallait aller plus au nord, et puis plus au nord aussi, il fallait travailler. Mineur, bien sûr. Et puis de là, on travaille, et puis du coup, on rencontre des gens qui... Il y a des policiers qui nous courent dessus, on est rejeté par la population, donc... Puis on a des migrants qui nous disent, allez de l'autre côté, ça serait plus mieux. Et puis de l'autre côté, on traverse aussi grâce aux passeurs, qui nous font traverser de l'autre côté qu'on appelle le Maroc. Puis le Maroc, la seule différence qu'on a, c'est le nom qu'on nous donne. Parce qu'en Algérie, on nous appelait les camarades, puis de l'autre côté, on nous dit mon ami. Et puis de là, mon ami, on nous dit, mon ami vient te cacher là, s'il y a les policiers, et puis ils disent, il y a mon ami qui est caché là, et puis il vient t'arrêter, il te frappe, et puis c'est horrible. Puis là, on vous dit, vous voyez de l'Espagne, il est de l'autre côté, donc c'est mieux, là-bas vous serez protégés, vous n'allez pas fuir la police. Là aussi, vous travaillez, puis si vous gagnez de l'argent pour payer les passeurs, vous payez les passeurs, et puis vous traversez. C'était pas un choix de venir, c'était une obligation de fuir et puis une obligation de traverser. Comme il y a beaucoup qui prétendent que oui, on veut venir, mais il faut vivre dans ces pays comme migrants pour comprendre ce qu'on souffre. De quoi on souffre, du moins. Et puis là, vous venez, j'étais enregistré en Espagne, et puis de l'Espagne, à ce temps, il y avait la crise, donc on ne pouvait pas accueillir tout le monde, et puis l'ONG m'a dit donc, ils m'ont traversé de Melilla à Barcelone. De Barcelone, j'ai fait 2 semaines.
To Barcelona, I spent 2 weeks in Barcelona, then they sent me to Murcia, and there an NGO said that I couldn't stay more than 2 or 3 weeks in Murcia, so I had to find work, or then if you don't have ID papers, you can't find work. You don't have work, you can't get ID papers, so it's a vicious circle. So I had to find another host country that could take me in. So I opted for Switzerland, and I also heard, because there was the Red Cross, I heard a lot about the Red Cross. So then I came to Switzerland. That was 2012. I came to the Vallorba reception center, and I got there at midnight, and at 2 or 3 in the morning we finished the administrative formalities, and I was trying to get off to sleep, and then at 6:30 there was a security guard who came to wake me up, and I said, look, I'm really tired, can I maybe skip breakfast? He said, if you want to leave, well, we'll give you a good reason to leave the country. And I said, well, yeah, that's really nice. And then I really like to read. So I went to this Vallorba reception center, and I met the chaplain, and that's where I met Antoinette, who's here on the podium, and we started to talk and discuss about this, and I told her my story, and she was really interested, and above all, she was moved by everything that I had gone through. And we talked about a lot of things. We talked about politics, and we talked about the books that I was reading. And this was the first time that someone didn't just talk about my itinerary as a migrant, that somebody saw me as a person, because I had really lost this notion of being a person. I was just a stranger, someone who was fleeing. And I really felt that someone was interested in me, someone who could really talk to me, not just about the problems that I had gone through. So I really liked to go there if she was there, and then her colleagues were really nice as well. And I would wait in front of the chaplain's office to see who would be coming by today, and as soon as they opened, then I'd come and I'd start to chat with them, because the authorities, the assistants who were there in the reception center, you couldn't really talk to them. It was a very hierarchical relationship. They were at the top, and I was the little inferior, the lesser being at the very bottom of the scale. In the chaplain's office, we were all equal, and they listened to me. And because they were in the center of Vallorba, there were a lot of young people who didn't come. They were afraid. They thought that this was the authorities, and they would try to get information out of me. I said, I don't have anything to hide. So the first time I went out of Vallorba to spend a weekend somewhere else, and that is something that had never happened to me since I came to Europe. That was the first time I had been invited to spend a little time in a Swiss family, and there were other children there, and the children, they didn't hesitate. They didn't say, oh, well, who are you? There's someone strange who's there. No. You come here with me, and they didn't talk about my story. They didn't even ask me where I came from in the center where I was. So I said, there's a real climate of trust here. And once again, I had become the child that I had lost the notion of being. And my ideas were really not that clear. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do. And I wanted to join the Foreign Legion. That's something that Antoinette reminded me of a little time ago. I wanted to flee, and I really didn't have a clear idea about my future, where I was headed. For me, it was just stage by stage. First I flee, then I come to another country, and she never said no. She never really opposed this idea of fleeing. She just said, well, spend a little bit of time here, try, and that really kind of reassured me. That gave me the courage I needed to keep going. So I attacked, and then from there, I started a vocational training program, and I had trouble there because I had trouble with the maths, and I had friends who really helped me, who tutored me, and there was especially one lady who really gave me a lot of help. And the help that she gave me, she said, you're a child, you're going to learn. And she didn't consider me, she just treated me like one of her children. She told me, this is what I have to do. Okay, she was very methodical. You do this, then you do that, and then tomorrow you come back, and then I'm going to check everything you've done. I said, whoa, wow. So then I started to really get a little more disciplined. I said to myself, yeah, that's what I've got to do. I've got to do this, this, and that, okay? So I really upped my levels in maths, and that let me enroll in a vocational training school. And then it didn't stop there. And then she said, you've got to find an apprenticeship. And when I went to see my assistant, he said to me, well, that's not my job. You've got to figure that out on your own. So they said, okay, let me help you write your motivation letter. So I did all of that, and that was really thanks to this lady. And then I got this apprenticeship program, and I completed it. And and I would give her little presents to say thank you, and to say that I felt. How can I say this? I felt that I was valued as a person. I was really considered as a human being. No one said, this was the first time people said, you've got ideas, you're smart, okay. No, what I was hearing, no, we don't want anything to do with you. And all of a sudden, with families and the friends that I made, who every time that I had contacts with the authorities, there was this very hierarchical relationship. We're on top, you're on the bottom, so I had trouble expressing myself, and I really couldn't flourish in this kind of environment. So with the friends and the family that really helped me all the way through this, I felt, how can I explain this? I could do better, and I did do better. So now I have a diploma, and I'm continuing my training. I'm looking for more degrees because I was really supported by other people, not just authority. And I forgot, with regard to when I had my interview, and when no one really trusts in you, and people said, well, we listened to you, we listened to your story, but you're not really that age. We're going to arbitrarily decide what age you are. And I said, well, if you don't believe what I'm saying, then why don't you write down the words that I'm telling you? Or you just decide. So I didn't sign this because the chaplain had told me that this is the way that things work in this migrant reception center. So I didn't sign the official record of this interview. And then finally they got a copy of my birth certificate. And here as well, there were a lot of young migrants in the canton where I live who speak of this sponsorship program, which today in the French-speaking cantons, it's represented everywhere. And these young migrants are really happy with this program, and they've improved themselves thanks to this sponsorship. And I would just like to thank Antoinette very warmly. She's done a lot, and she's doing a lot for the sponsorship program. Thanks for listening to me. Thank you very much, Sanoussy, for your testimony. And now we're going to listen to Coline, who's going to speak to us. And she said before that this is the first time that she's ever spoken in public. So try to be nice and welcoming towards her. And we're very happy to have you here. I'm going to tell you how I came from one brother to almost five and what I thought of this whole process. So I'm going to talk about the first sponsorship we had and how everything happened during this experience. First of all, where we got the idea for this sponsorship program. We'd never really heard about these families that the friends around us that work with this, and just to say that in the press there was an article about a sponsoring family and photos, and they encouraged other families to do the same thing. And they said that they were very interested. So I was a little bit hesitant at the beginning because I thought, well, yeah, it might kind of break this balance within the family. Maybe it was a bit selfish, but I didn't really feel like changing my habits and everything. So at the beginning, I wasn't really that hot on the idea. Okay. And then we talked about this to my father, and a few weeks later he said, he asked us what we thought about all of this. Well, I kind of hoped he had forgotten about all of this in the meantime, but he didn't. And my 15-year-old brother was a bit like me. We were worried that it might be kind of bothersome, and so we said that we could have said no, but that would have been pretty selfish of us. And then also what Antoinette was saying, the fact that when you try to put yourself in the other's shoes, and if we could been in another country, it would have been great to know that there was a family, someone who was there for us, who would look after us. So a few weeks later, we met them at the Crissier Migrant Reception Center, and on the way there, I was really worried. I was, had butterflies in my stomach, and here as well, once again, I tried to put myself in the shoes of the person who was waiting for us, a family of 5, and we all speak the same language. We all know each other, and then this person is all on their own. So this helped me kind of see things in perspective, to imagine their situation. And what really struck us was that he was so smiling. He was really friendly, and that really touched us, because we really wanted to see him again. And then on the spot, we did some games so we could get to know each other. And we could really see that the only thing that worried him was the first time he talked to us said, "I don't eat pork," okay? And we could see that he was worried about meeting us. He had concerns, and so, and then after this, he came. I don't know if it was once a week, but he came to, for instance, to have dinner sometimes during the week. And before he came, we were a little bit bothered, and we said, well, what are we going to, how can we talk to each other? Because he didn't speak French all that well. So he had been in Switzerland for a year and a half, but when he got here, he was 15, and he was relatively young, and he wasn't maybe in a home reception center where people spoke the same, they spoke his language, but he wasn't hearing a lot of French. So the first time it was fun, but it was, we had a little bit of trouble. We kind of said, well, what are we going to say to each other when, but, in the final analysis, a change kind of took place on its own. And now he comes once a week, and then he spends the weekends with us in our mountain chalet. And so he's really become like a fully fledged member of the family, and we're not really bothered anymore. It's not like he's a guest anymore. In the beginning, when we would clear off the table, and then afterwards he would clear off the table with us as well. And also, with regard to the problems that we faced, I think this is mainly due to the fact that I'm a girl, and I think that there's not the same men and women in his country. In Afghanistan, it's a bit different. So there was a little bit of a distance between us, and it was a bit hard for me in the beginning to really build these ties with him. We just said hi to each other, and he tended to talk to my mother, who really threw herself heart and soul into this project, and she talked to him a lot, and he was kind of, she was his entry point into the family, and then of course my brothers, and then they would play soccer together, and obviously I stayed at home and let my brothers play soccer with him. So in the beginning it was a little bit hard for me to really build these ties with him, and now as well he speaks French really well. Maybe not as well as Sanoussy, but I mean, he's really fitting in more and more. And I think that now, if you can really speak a language well, and you can really understand the nuances and everything. So now he came last week, and he got there a little earlier, and I was all on my own at home, and it wasn't as if he were a stranger coming in our home. No, it was really natural. So that was kind of cool. And here as well, I'm the eldest in my family, and I don't have any elder cousins or anything, so I kind of became his big sister. So I thought that was kind of cool too, and I thought that was that was pretty nice. And the first time he came, we were worried that he wouldn't fit in, that he wouldn't feel accepted at our house, that he wouldn't want to come. And one time he came almost 2 hours late, and we said, oh, well, he's going to end the program. He doesn't want to keep coming to see us. And in fact, he came with a loaf of typical bread from his country. He was supposed to come right after his vocational training course, and he went back to his reception center, which is a half-hour bus trip away, to bake a special bread so that we could then taste this special bread. And he wanted to really make this a special event for us. And with regard to what happened to him, his experiences, we didn't really want to start asking him all these questions. We wanted to wait until he opened up and told us about it. So pretty quickly he started to talk about this. I think that was because his parents are still alive and he's still in contact with his parents. So it wasn't quite as hard for him to talk about it. And the idea is when he could leave Switzerland and he could make sure he could come back to Switzerland, he could go back and visit his family in Afghanistan. And so now we have regular news of his family, so it's not at all like it was before. It's not a taboo subject anymore. And now also this winter he's going to go skiing with us, and we taught him how to ski, and after the second day he was already going down the slopes on his own. And so that's just to say that now he's at home a lot, and now my elder brother's he's like an elder brother who's moved away from home and has his own flat, and he comes back to visit once in a while. And in the beginning we really thought that, well, how would this work out? So those were the problems that we had, and they were mainly for me, because, you know, I was a teenager and I was nice and happy at home, and I didn't want to disturb all of this. So, and I'm a girl, but there were no inappropriate comments, but there was just kind of a bigger distance than with my brothers. And also what that really did for us, I can't really put this in words, but it's like a new member of the family. And it's, culturally speaking, we are trying to learn Farsi a little bit, but we can't say that much on it yet. But he's a really good cook. He's doing a vocational training program as a cook, so he sometimes cooks for all of the family along with my mom. And so that's what I had to say.
So I would like to ask the three of you a question. We have a few minutes left before we go to the next speaker. So, as you know, this meeting is organized by UNICEF and the World Council of Churches, and we both work a lot together, and also each one within our organization on this topic of children on the move, migrant, refugee children. So, based on your experience, each one of you, your individual experience, is there something you would like to suggest to us that we do more, that we do less, that we pay attention to, something specific? Is there something you would like to encourage all of us, not just the big organizations, but all of us here? What would you like to, you have any suggestion, any proposal for us? Who wants to start?
Bah, peut-être de plus en parler, en tout cas nous, enfin si on n'était pas tombé sur cet article, on aurait jamais eu l'occasion de faire ça et bah oui, peut-être simplement plus en parler. Bon, nous on est aussi passé dans un magazine justement pour ça, mais enfin ouais voilà, que les gens soient plus au courant et puis c'est aussi par des amis, etc. Maintenant on a presque tous nos amis qui parrainent aussi, donc je sais pas, plus ouais voilà, plus faire plus connaître cette possibilité là. Et pas uniquement, peut-être que les gens aussi se disent soit je l'accueille et tout le temps à la maison, mais là c'est vraiment pas non plus très contraignant dans le sens où il vient une fois par semaine ou plus si on a envie, mais c'est vraiment extrêmement on s'organise un peu comme on veut et peut.
Et tes amis, est-ce que tu parlais avec ils connaissent les collègues d'Afghanistan? Oui. Comment ça va avec tes groupes d'amis, des collègues de l'école et tout ça?
Friends at school, and well, we laugh about this, but my mom has really urged all the families we know to sponsor people as well, and people are saying, oh yeah, you're a sponsoring family too. So my mom has really publicized this around her, you could say. But yeah, it's working out really well, I'd have to say. Okay, now I'd like to speak in French this time. I think that the work, this networking, this effort in the field really has to boo. If you want to support these links, I think that you have to link this into some kind of a training effort and an awareness building effort of what asylum really means right now. This year, there were much fewer unaccompanied minors who arrived in Switzerland and in Europe in general. It's not because there are no more children traveling unaccompanied. It's because these children stay in Libya, somewhere in the desert, and that is something that we really have to denounce that on all different levels. And here I think that yes, we can take in people here, but we really have to also help those who would like to come and who are living in terrible conditions. And what I also see is that there's a real need to work on existing structures, to tend to them, to improve them, to make sure that all of the procedures respect the children's rights. Here, I'm thinking of the fact that, as Sanoussy told us a few minutes ago, for a young person who's arriving, he's 15 or 16, if he's managed to get through all of these obstacles that prevented him from coming, it's going to be very complicated for him to prove that he's 15 or 16 and not an adult. And our states, really, it's in their interest to say, oh, well, these are adult children, they're not minors, because then they can just send them somewhere else. I think that here we really have a monitoring role to play. We have to ask the questions. There's the neighborhood, the proximity effort, but also we have to really make sure that things are handled properly by the authorities. Well, I'm really the prototype, I could say. So I think that this sponsorship project is a really good project, and we have to improve it, because the administration is an administration, okay, but there are a lot of obstacles that they throw up, because there's not much trust between the young people on the one hand and then the administrative assistants who are dealing with them. So first of all, they really have to view us as young people, as teenagers who've gone through very difficult experiences that have made us grow up before our years in terms of the Swiss authorities, because, believe me, this is very difficult. And at the same time, these are structures. This structure helped me personally. Now, if you hadn't been there, Antoinette, would I still be here today? That really is the question. And I think that that really helped, and this helps a lot of young people, and a lot of young people are happy that they can go eat with Swiss families. We learn a lot doing this. It's because we watch, we see what's happening, how you sit at table, and the customs are different in our country, so we're learning every day. And So you can really stress these are details, but for us these are important. You don't necessarily think of them. That's very useless. It is very useful when it comes to fitting in. And the best way to ensure good integration is these contact with these families that take us in, these sponsoring families.
When I was listening to you, I was remembering one meeting we had with national committees for UNICEF in different countries. The colleagues from Ireland were talking about an experience they had in a school, talking where they were migrant and host community children all together, and the migrant children were talking about their experience and how they have felt welcome. And the Irish children said, well, but of course this is because it is you, but we are afraid of the others. It's the others that are worrying us. And it's that difference, no? Once you know and you have that human contact, it's not a refugee anymore, it's not a migrant anymore, it's your friend. But the others are scary, no? And I think projects as this one are critical to break that concept of the other. But I think it's very important what you said, Antoinette, is we cannot do either or, no? You cannot do either we work on the big policies or we work in the contact. We need to do both, and through this direct contact be able to identify the issues, as you were saying, no? The problem, what happens when they turn 18, what happens about access to education, what happens, and that I think our role is also to take that experience, that specific experience from you. And I would also like to make emphasis on one issue that Sanoussy raised indirectly. When we talk about children and migration, we tend to think about the migrant children and the need to protect and support them and welcome them. And this is, of course, the main goal. But we cannot ignore the importance of children as factors of integration themselves. And you were talking about the children in your host family who didn't see you as a migrant but just started to play with you and break the ice. Children are critical for that, no? And how, through working with children ourselves at the schools, at the parish, like how can we also build on that strength of the children themselves and help us like use them to help us in that sense. I think that is very important. And talking about raising the voice and combining this work at the direct contact with the more structural, and upwards work. As I mentioned before, this year 2018 is been a very important year for the topic of migration. There are two major processes at the UN level being discussed, a global compact on refugees, a global compact on migrants, that should accommodate all these things that we are talking about, should establish guidance and direction for the governments to really ensure they provide an appropriate treatment to children. And all these negotiations are being very difficult because, as we all know, this is a politically sensitive issue. It is very charged. There are many interests, and the phantom of xenophobia, discrimination is always there. And in that context, I think the World Council of Churches in particular, faith-based organizations more widely, are playing a very important, a very proactive role. And there have been a couple of major conferences, major events that have taken place recently. One of them was the World Conference on Xenophobia, Racism, and Populist Nationalism in the context of global migration. And the other was a meeting of different faith-based organizations in what was called a Global Partners Forum for Children on the Move, where a plan of action has been discussed and agreed around this topic. And I would like now to call on stage Peter Proof. He's the director of the World Council of Churches Commission of the Church's own international affairs, and he's going to share with us briefly the outcomes of both events. Peter, please. Not sure I pronounce it well. It's Proof, not Proof, right? Proof. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Before I speak about the conferences that you just mentioned, Marta, and having heard the remarks made by Philippe, by yourself, and especially by the speakers in this panel, I want to share with you some points that were contained in a statement adopted by the Executive Committee of the World Council of Churches just a couple of weeks ago when we met as the Executive Committee in Uppsala in Sweden. That statement was speaking to the issue of people on the move, migrants and refugees. And it sought to lift up and to affirm the example given to their societies and their governments by the many churches around the world that seek to be, and here I quote, true servants of Christ by welcoming the stranger, the refugees and the migrants, especially in contexts in which refugees and migrants are increasingly stigmatized, discriminated against, criminalized, marginalized, and excluded. And I think we've heard another such example from the speakers here today. Amongst other things, that statement also, and here I wish Philippe was here to hear it, strongly reaffirmed the Convention on the Rights of the Child and specifically condemned the practice of separating families and detaining children in migration contexts. Noting that we are in this process this year of adopting global compacts on both refugees and migration, the Executive Committee called for all members of the international community to adopt global compacts and to implement measures that will strengthen, not weaken, the protection of people on the move. Now, this statement actually drew heavily upon the outcomes of the two conferences that Marta just mentioned. The first one, a joint conference between the World Council of Churches and the Vatican, held in Rome in September. This conference had that long title of Xenophobia, Racism, and Populist Nationalism in the context of global migration. A very long title, but hopefully raising very specific and sharp points. The points that I think undergird the crisis that we face on this matter. I just want to read to you some of the, I think, very powerful language that came out of that conference outcome. The message says that to refuse to receive and help those in need is contrary to the example and calling of Jesus Christ. Claiming to protect Christian values or communities by shutting out those who seek safe refuge from violence and suffering is unacceptable, undermines Christian witness in the world, and raises up national boundaries as idols. It said that based upon the principles of our Christian faith and the example of Jesus Christ, we seek to raise a narrative of love and of hope against the populist narrative of hate and fear. And then 1 month later, and just over 1 month ago today, a further conference brought this issue to an even sharper point. A conference, a global forum for faith action for children on the move, in which the World Council of Churches partnered with a large number of very significant faith-based organizations in order to bring this conversation forward. The real purpose of this conference was to develop a roadmap for faith action to respond to and scale up action for children on the move. And the outcomes of that conference outcome noted that a faith-based response to displaced people and children on the move entails a distinctive depth of compassionate accompaniment of people in the midst of crisis and suffering, which goes beyond the kind of response that a humanitarian agency is able or indeed mandated to provide. It presented an action plan that encompasses areas of action across 3 main dimensions: providing spiritual support to children, families, and caregivers as a source of healing and resilience for those people. It addressed the issue of strengthening the continuum of care for child protection across the whole spectrum and life cycle of displacement. And it addressed building peaceful societies and opposing xenophobia, racism, and discrimination. This is an extensive document with very specific action points. It is presented as a framework not for separate action, but for collective action by the faith sector together. It is still open for comment and reflection. I think we can project it there, and we will have documents, copies of the document available at the rear of the room or outside. I commend it to all of you. I think it will provide us with new tools for addressing this issue as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. I think time has come to put this panel to an end, but I don't want to close without thanking the three of you in particular, of course Peter as well, but the three of you for bringing your experience, your personal experience, your testimony, and I think your inspiration to all of us. Quoting Antoinette, as you said, in our European world obsessed with the idea of closing or building borders, I think this is much needed than ever. So really, thank you so much, and we look forward to continuing the conversation. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.